Here's where we get to the heart of the matter. There are some fundamental concerns for both risk-based and standard fee. I'm not going to read them to you, but if you haven't read them, let me give you a minute to read them now. Because if you read these two statements and you understand what they're saying, then you've gotten it. Then you've understood what I've just finished spending the last 45 minutes or so telling you. I didn't talk too much about the use of assessment instruments on standard fee, so that one may be a little bit murky. What I mean in the risk-based concern is that risk-based funding systems work very well, but in environments that are narrowly defined. And those environments are one where the risk base is as large as it can be, and the range of need is as large as it can be. In those environments, capitations work great, particularly if they have a real solid reinsurance backing them up. They work well in healthcare. Not as well as some would like, but they do. By the way, capitations to healthcare plans have standardized fee schedules underneath them. You know, if you pay the Blue Cross, the Blues, you pay them a capitation rate. They pay the hospitals out at a DRG schedule, diagnostic related group schedule, or in some cases a relative value unit approach. Are you all familiar with any of those? Again, it's a get a life issue. You don't want to be familiar with those if you can avoid it. But in inpatient clinical rates, they're done very precisely with using a bunch of instruments that go all the way back to 1989. Standard fee, other than the concerns of implementing it in an environment where there has always been negotiated rates, where a standard fee schedule is in place, a lot of what determines whether it will be successful or not is how the specific fee is selected for a specific individual. If you link it to an assessment instrument, you could run into problems. There could be problems with that. Like, for instance, in Delaware. No, I don't want to talk about Delaware. There are some states that use the ICAP in the developmental disability world to determine which rate will be assigned to John based on the ICAP score. The problem with that is the ICAP was never designed for that. It's an educational instrument, not a resource allocation instrument. What can happen with an assessment instrument that isn't well designed for that purpose is you create a situation where people are given an incentive to describe me in my worst terms so they can get more money. And then the other question is, how frequently do you reassess? What if my situation changes? And the worst possible outcome is if I go through the assessment protocol and I get assessed an appropriate amount of supports and everything's going great for me. And then when I come upon reassessment, since everything's going well, the supports are removed. And you all know those issues. That's what I'm referring to in the second piece here. And then there's some potential failures, on both sides. Now, on this, what I'd like to drive home, or what I'd like to underline and emphasize, is that a failure is not necessarily a financial failure where the agency or the state or the provider, whatever it is, goes out of business, although that is a failure. It's not just that. It's also a situation where you create an environment where there's financially defensive behavior that causes large sums of money to be idle. That's, in our minds and Medicaid minds, that's equally failure, because you have programmatic money that the federal government is assuming is going to be spent on consumers and users of the services that is sitting idle. It's not as severe a failure as when you take out a provider or a regional agency, but it is a lack of success at best.